Rosie Hardy Gardening here. It's Q&A time. Hello, I have an ornamental cherry. I would like to prolong flowering season. I would like to put a climber through it. What would you advise that I use? It is southwest facing, clay soil in Kent, UK. Many thanks. Putting climbers through trees can be tricky. You need to be aware that you don't want things which have got massive big leaves, otherwise they can impede the way that the tree grows. However, the main things that I would suggest for an area like this, especially with your clay soil, would be something like Clematis Bill Mackenzie or Clematis Blue Tapers. They are really good. They're moderately vigorous. They flower a lot later in the season, so you would get a lot of growth going through there. Hello, I have a few Georgia Peach Pie dianthus, which were lovely, produce lots of flowers. Third season in my garden. I've only ever really cut back the flower, and I've noticed they've got woody and leggy at the base. When would you suggest cutting them back? The answer is yes, you should be cutting back, and really every time you deadhead or when you have a lapse in the amount of flower that is there, go back a little bit further. The other thing to do is in the spring, when you see all the new growth coming and you can see you've got good green growth around the edge and then there's good green growth in the middle, cut back to that. Then you stop the plants from becoming too leggy. But do remember, as an individual plant, they're probably not going to be fantastic much over 5 years of age. Can I use scissors for doing cuttings, and is Surgical Spirit something that I can use for cleaning tools? Okay, now it's perfectly okay to use scissors as long as they are good and sharp. That's absolutely no problem at all. You will find them easier to use. Surgical Spirit can clean your tools with. Remember, it's quite harsh. If you use that, rinse it off with soapy water, and then always use a lovely lightweight oil, something like almond oil or camellia oil, to then put over the blades to keep them functioning and being really good. Now, if you are somebody who enjoys propagation, please do take a look at our propagation workshop. This you will find a link to here, and you know, you get to do all sorts of different propagation through this course. Please just have a look. Hello Rosie, I have a new pulmonaria. It's very hot here in the summer. Will it stay perennial living in a pot, growing indoors for summer and back outside the rest of the year? Thank you. This is quite difficult because when it gets really hot, most pulmonarias do start to die back. Certainly, yes, if you're putting it inside and it's still got good light, then the plant will stay perennial and you can put it back outside. Just be careful that it doesn't get too shady or at least too warm as well inside, because it is a plant that likes to be outside all the time. If it gets very hot in the summer, it will naturally die back down. So it's really up to you. Try it. I don't think you'll do it any harm. Should I have cut my peonies? I'm in the UK. Also, I have a hot lip salvia. It's about 3 foot tall and looking a bit scraggly. So what should I do with that? Right, okay, so peonies in the UK, if you're talking about herbaceous peonies, their foliage will have gone all sorts of beautiful autumn coloration. It will drop down naturally and then you can just tidy it up. So actually cutting back isn't really a problem with that. If it's a tree peony you're talking about, then they should be cut back after flowering. So at this time of the year, yes, you can reduce a little bit, but the best time is actually after flowering. With your Salvia hot lips, if you go back through our back catalogue of videos, you will see that I have done how to treat your Salvia through the winter, and it will show you step by step what to do with it. I bought 2 beautiful outdoor chrysanthemums in outer pots. so that I can swap them when I need them. So basically one goes in the outer pot, the other one goes somewhere else, swap them over, absolutely fine. No problem with that. They were pot bound as usual, so I repotted straight away. Within 10 days, they were obviously dying, all buds withered brown. But in the ground last week, about a month later, saw lovely new buds coming up. Can you tell me what I did wrong, if anything? Now, this type of pot chrysanthemum will always be pot bound in their pots. That is just the nature of how they grow. So changing that into putting them into a bigger pot has shocked their system. So they've sort of done a dieback, and then because you put them in the ground, they've then come back through. So technically, I would not have done anything to the one that was in the pot. I would have just kept it watered and fed. It would have done its thing. And then once it was finished, then put it out into the ground and it will continue to grow. So I think that's just the problem. You gave it a little bit of a shock. So don't worry, but they will always look as though they're pot bound when you get those. Water and feed and they will still flower perfectly well. Put them in the ground and they will get away and make a nice plant. Hi Rosie, I've read that daffodil bulbs can suppress other plants and have noticed it's hard to get foxgloves to grow above clumps of ice follies. And similarly, annuals grow above tete-a-tete clumps. Is this true? If so, how does the effect reach? This is a little bit of an old wives' tale saying that you can't put them over the top. Yes, daffodils, when you cut them and you put them into a vase with other flowers, they don't like it. So you have to let them stop bleeding and getting rid of all of that horrible goo that they do out of the flowers, and then put them into water, then take them out of that, cut them again, and they won't exude, and you can then mix them with other flowers. But it doesn't apply to the bulbs. I think what's happening though is probably that the bulbs are not being planted deep enough. So they need to go down. So a daffodil bulb needs to be going 3 times the depth of the actual bulb. So they're going quite a long way down. If they're near the surface, yes, they're going to fight their corner and something will just go, oh, I'm not going to grow over you. That's a slightly different thing from them actually being a problem with them. So if you're wanting to put hardy geraniums there and you're wanting to put daffodils, go ahead, but just make sure you plant your daffodils well and deep and then put your hardy geraniums in. There will be no problem at all. When I'm planting trees and shrubs, I sprinkle some bone meal in the planting hole, as I believe this is beneficial for root development. Do you agree? Oh, and then there's a comment. I'm not reading that out. Okay, so bone meal is high in phosphorus, which is brilliant. And that is great because that is what new shrubs and trees need. They need phosphorus for root growth. That's absolutely fine. However, too much phosphorus can be bad. So this is where you really need to know what your soil type is, particularly the pH. So get one of the cheap soil testing kits from a garden centre, test your soil, see what the pH is. Anything that is above pH of 7 and therefore going really alkaline, using bone meal is not a good idea because it changes and it becomes less effective as an actual food. So, and also if you're somebody who is using mycorrhizal fungi to go in as well when you're planting, then using bone meal is not good either. So check what your pH is. In principle, putting bone meal in is good, but not when you've got a very alkaline soil. It won't do any good at all. Rosie, I love Eramuris, but it can get very low in centigrade here in rural Yorkshire, and with the wet winters I seem to lose them. What do you think about digging these octopus roots up and treating them like dahlias? Well, Ken, I think that actually is probably a very good idea. You can also, though, grow these octopus like Eramuris. Yeah, if anybody doesn't know, you get a huge big bud and you get these big fat roots coming out, and it really does look like an octopus, and they go out sideways. But the roots do go down eventually. So you can grow them in a container. If you're growing them in the ground and they're getting too wet, then absolutely lift them, let them dry off, replant them out in the spring, and they should be perfectly okay. Hi Rosie, I have an aeonium I put out for the summer. I usually bring it indoors over winter, but it is a bit too big to accommodate in a sunny spot indoors. Will it be okay in an unheated greenhouse if I fleece it at times? What temperature should I fleece it at? Many thanks. And I bought some plants from you this year, all doing well. Yes, now my own aeoniums I keep in a tunnel which is heated to frost-free, and it doesn't ever go below +5 degrees centigrade. So if your aeoniums are in a cold greenhouse and it's going down, and you know it's going to go down below 4 degrees, then you need to make sure that you fleece it then. Once it goes lower, then you really need to make sure perhaps you have double fleece over the top of it. The other thing I think would be really good is if you can put some bubble wrap or some hessian or an old blanket or something like that around the actual pot. Try not to cover the top of the soil too much, and definitely don't make it waterproof at the bottom. It needs airflow to go through, but if you can insulate the pot as well as putting the fleece over the top, that will really make a difference to the aeonium. And I know what you mean when they get too big, they become really quite large. They are fabulous plants, enjoy it and just protect it. Okay, this one, Bob Brown says avoid planting in the autumn. Buy the plant if you want to, but let it stay in its pot until spring. No doubt this is a general rule hedged around by exceptions, but do you agree? All right, so I do agree for certain plants. If you are in a clay soil area, if you are in a frost pocket, then those are gardens where you really should be avoiding too much autumn planting. If they are in a container, you can usually plant all year round, absolutely no problem. So if you've got lighter soils, it's still very pleasant in the autumn, then yes, go ahead and plant. We all have our sort of rules that we run by with when we're going, and anybody who has bought plants from us at Hardy's will know if we know the plant is something that we don't think should go in the ground, we will tell you. But it's not everything, but we do advise clay, wet gardens and frost pocket gardens do not plant in the autumn. I hope that helps you. Hello Rosie, a friend dug me up a clump of his Inula magnifica 2 years ago. First year didn't flower, now this year it has flowered wonderfully. There are some ripe seeds. What about propagating them by sowing them, and when should I divide the clumps? Okay, so dividing the clumps is very easy. You can do it in the autumn, but it's probably still got these wonderful seed heads on, so don't worry. Wait until the spring, see the new shoots coming up, lift it up and divide it then. They make quite big clumps, so it will be quite heavy work. The seed, sow it fresh. So you've got the seed, scatter it on pots or seed trays, put one lot into a greenhouse, put one lot into a cold frame, and you'll be amazed at how well they come up. I hope that helps you. So many plants are being given new classifications, i.e. Sedum spectabile and now Hylam telephium spectabile. Can you explain some of the thinking in layman's terms? Any hints at learning the new Latin names? Right, it is confusing, and it's confusing for me as well. We always get some there. So with the sedums, for instance, you still get sedum roofs. So think about all the ones that are used for sedum roofs are spring flowering. So they are still called sedum. Anything that flowers in the autumn has now moved to Hylotelephium. This is all being done because of DNA testing. And yes, it can be difficult to learn the names. And you don't have to learn the names, but it does help you if you're going to order online or you're going to a nursery who is up to date with their nomenclature. What I recommend you do is, if you have the plants and you are putting them out in the garden, handwrite your labels. Don't just use the one that you bought the plant with. Handwrite the labels and then stick it in. Write it down again. You'll be surprised at how quickly, after writing something down and also saying it at the same time, so you write it, Hylotelephium, and then you write it again and you speak it, it goes in. Yes, you may have to do it 2 or 3 times, but that is the easiest way to learn, by repetition. I have Salvia hot lips, but it's in the wrong place. It's massive and takes too much space. I've seen your pruning video, thank you for that. We'll prune it low to the ground. But when is a good time to move it? I am in the south of the UK, thank you. Okay, so this plant is going to be going into dormancy. It is a sub-shrub. Sub-shrubs are things which have woody growth at the top, but also send up lovely young shoots from below ground level in the spring. And I would always suggest, even if you are in the south of England, lifting and moving it in the spring. It will be much better. It will be actively growing. You can prune back to the new growths on the old wood as well. You can see the new growth coming and you can move it to a place where it is better suited for your garden. Hello Rosie, I live in Leeds, the UK. I bought a Geum a month ago and it's leafing really well. The question I'd like to ask is, will the Geum flower this year? It is one of the fiery series. Okay, so we'll start with the Geum. You may get an odd flower now because they are a series that flowers on through the year. So you may be lucky, but I would think it will be flowering better for you next year in the spring. You've also asked about some dwarf sweet peas that you're growing and whether they will grow this year too. They're the first time you've grown them and they're on your balcony. It's south facing. Well, I have to say, if you are talking about the end of September, beginning of October, and those dwarf sweet peas have not actually flowered now, then I don't think they're going to flower, because sweet peas, they're the ones I'm thinking about, are grown as an annual. That means they are set from seed in one year, they grow that year, they flower that year, and at the end of the year they die. Now, unless you have got a dwarf perennial type, which I haven't heard of, then I'm sorry to say I think you're going to be a little bit disillusioned and unhappy that they don't actually flower. Sorry to say that. Hi Rosie, I have a problem with a sedum. I bought a sedum from a nursery, bright, it had some dry, rough spots like scars on the leaves. I thought it had been fried by raindrops and strong sun, so I didn't think it was a problem. Took it back, planted in the garden. I have lots of other sedums there. We are talking hylotelephiums here. Second and third year, it switched to all of the sedums. Tried to find out what it is. Pictures only show black spot. I'm in Croatia. The summer here gets very dry and hot. I believe it's not due to humidity. Are there any diseases that can cause this? And I'm afraid to say, yes, there are. There are fungal and bacterial diseases which hylotelephiums are getting, and it is highly transmissible between the hylotelephiums. It is transferred by our fungal spores or the bacteria getting into raindrops and passing from one to the other. And when it gets drier, then it will let off the fungal spores and it will spread as well. So I'm afraid to say that you have now got that disease in. You can, by tidying up, clearing up all the old dead leaf and getting rid of it very, very quickly, you can clean them up a bit by making sure they get a good amount of food and they're actively growing. And then if you see anything happening, like the spotting happening on the leaves again, you get rid of it, you cut it back and you make it regrow. You should be able to get them out of it. Just clean everything up. Hello Rosie, do you have any suggestions for part sun, drought resistant, deer resistant plants for zone 6 in the US? I love tall and large plants that take up a big amount of space. I've got an area, the front of my garden, it gets odd angles of sun, and it can, I find that a lot of the sun-loving plants always lean and fall over. So it is basically part sun, needs to be drought resistant, deer resistant. That's another factor. Zone 6 is minus 20 degrees Celsius. My suggestion for you is you need to have a very good look in local woodland edges and see what your natural plants are that are thriving there, because this will give you an idea of the plants families that you need to be looking at to go and get from your local nurseries. And I would say that you will probably find there are some very good local grasses, which will give you height and give you spread, and they will be very tolerant. You may even find that perhaps Vernonia would be a good suggestion, or maybe Verbascum. But do look at your natural environment first to get plant genera, to then go and look for plants that are for the garden, and that's your easiest way of doing it. Also, you may have a local master gardener who may be able to help you as well. Thank you very much for watching, and please do subscribe to the channel. If you want to watch another video of mine, YouTube thinks this one is perfect for you.